Let's get right to it here, ladies and gentlemen. This is the guy we're going to send back to Olympia to keep this fight up. The leader that's kind of getting those people like Dave that now they say you got to watch out for his votes. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Shea.
Thank you. So, a couple of weeks ago, the toilet in our law office in the basement overflowed. And calling the plumber, plumber says, "You guys buy some of those high-efficiency toilets for the upstairs?" Yeah, we did. And he said, "Yeah, well, there's not enough water to get it out to the sewer line." So literally, I'm in a world of crap because of radical environmentalism in Washington State. Kidding me. So I'd like to say thank you to a few people tonight. First, I would like to thank my wife, Victoria, who allows this to happen and has put up with so much and been there through thick and thin, Spokesman Review front page and not. Victoria, please stand up. Next, I would like to thank my mom and dad, and specifically my mom, because she says the story is that I came out bellowing and I haven't stopped since. So, Mom and Dad, if you'd please stand up, let's give them a round of applause. And I want to thank Dave and Molly Taylor. Dave has been with me through thick and thin, and in Olympia, having brothers stand shoulder to shoulder with you and go through the fire with you, it's almost like combat down there, and I really mean it. I mean, it is constant pressure, constant nagging, constant, "Hey, Shea, will you get Taylor and Overstreet under control?" And I look at him and say, "No, they're doing the right thing. Why aren't you voting with us?" You know? So, Dave and Molly, please stand up. One of my best friends in the whole world. So as I start every speech, but particularly this weekend, this resurrection weekend, our hope is not in man, our hope is in Jesus Christ. Amen? Amen. All right. So that said, it's great to be with all of you pro-life, gun-toting, Constitution-loving, homeschooling, freedom-loving, 4th District Americans today. I love it. So 6 years ago, I went to Olympia and I said I was going to vote against tax increases. I said I was going to fight against all this out-of-control government. I said I was going to be a champion of more freedom. And I could stand before you honestly today and say that I did what I said I was going to do 6 years ago. And what's really cool about that is people are now actually calling Spokane Valley the capital of free Washington. I love that. I'd like to honor a couple people tonight as well because they have done such a phenomenal job in really setting an example for the rest of the country. And they are Ed Pace and Rod Higgins, who are councilmen on Spokane Valley City Council. If you guys could stand up, let's give them a round of applause. So I want to tell you about these guys. So a budget in Spokane Valley of $30 million. And they have $28 million in reserve and no debt except the 90-day revolving debt. That is an example for the rest of the country. That is an example for Detroit, I think. Don't you guys? Yeah. Last but not least, I'd like to honor my good friend and really, really good friend who has, I think, completely turned around the attitude in county government because of his honesty, his integrity, his transparency. And he is the first Republican. You would think that establishment folks would not run somebody against him in the primary, but they did. They recruited somebody against him, even though he's the first Republican treasurer in 54 years. Rob Chase, please stand up. Let's give you a round of applause. So I'm going to ask you tonight, I'm going to ask you tonight, how many of you are going to change the world? Raise your hand. It should be every hand in this room saying that. And the reason I say that is because the rest of the world is looking to America and is looking specifically to Republicans, conservative Republicans in America for leadership. They're looking to us for leadership. It's not enough anymore to say, you know, we're a conservative and talk a good game. We've got to live a good game. How many Republicans in Washington State in the last 40 years controlled both the House and the Senate, and then lastly, the governor's mansion? How many years have Republicans controlled those? Anybody know? Last 40? Two. The old ways of moderating our message are not working, of being afraid of our own shadow are not working. What works, I think, is not just talking about it, but leading, championing freedom. That's what works. So let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about the Second Amendment. You can't just say I'm pro-gun. Question is, like Jeff Holy says, do you carry and are you trained to use it? What about pro-gun legislation? How much pro-gun legislation have you sponsored? Together with the Freedom Agenda, we crafted the floor amendments to defeat gun control in Washington State. But we didn't just stop there. We went on the offense. And we said, you know what? We should have a sales tax exemption for firearms and ammunition in Washington State because everyone should have affordable self-defense in the state of Washington. It's not enough either to say that you're just opposed to tax increases. The question is, how did you vote? Did you vote for a cap and trade scheme like some of our fellow legislators here locally? Did you vote for a budget that depended on $1 billion in tax increases like some of our legislators who call themselves Republican did locally? Instead, through social media, we were able to kill the zombie gas tax that kept dying and coming alive 7 times. That is freedom and liberty. But we can't just stop there and say, oh, we defeated something. We got to go on the offense. And that means we introduced a 2/3 requirement to raise taxes as a constitutional amendment and to lower the sales tax in Washington State. That's going on the offense. Let's talk about the pro-life issue. One of these issues where Republicans are afraid of their own shadow. And you would think it's the first right enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, right? You'd think we would say, hey, let's champion that. Going on the offense means like what Dave Taylor did this year, and that was to introduce an amendment to the budget to defund Planned Parenthood and give that money to disabled veterans. That's going on the offense. We don't need people who are going to say one thing on the campaign trail and do another in Olympia. We need leaders. And we need people who are going to build coalitions around issues. All of our Freedom Agenda bills, we had 50 Democrat co-sponsors on our bills. So when you hear somebody say, well, Matt Shea has marginalized himself on the extreme right and he can't get anything done. Well, I'm over there with the Democrats, apparently. I don't know. It's pretty interesting that we get that gets said about us, and we have reached across and we have bridged in extraordinary ways. And let me give you one specific example. When Matt Shea, the arch right-wing guy who's a Christian conservative, gets invited to speak in downtown Seattle by an anarchist lesbian to a crowd of Democrats, we are making progress in Washington State. And that's because leadership is not the ability to compromise. It's the ability not to. It's the ability to articulate your principles in such a way as to bring people over to your point of view. That's why Ronald Reagan was so good, and that takes courage. The easy road is a yes vote. The easy road is not carrying the banner for freedom and just staying under the radar. The easy road is going along to get along, and the easy road is worrying about getting reelected. There was a movie, actually, and I'm digressing a little bit. There was a movie called Gattaca a long while back. And in that movie, one of the brothers is genetically superior to the other brother. And they have this swimming race, and they keep going out, and they keep going out, and this genetically superior brother keeps beating him. And then finally one day, the non-genetically superior brother beats him, and the brother asks him, "How did you do that?" And he said, "Because I swam and didn't save any energy for the return trip." That is how we need to treat politics. We need to go into politics in Olympia and not let the naysayers say, "Oh, you can't do that." We need to do it. We need to do it because that's what our founding fathers did. They didn't worry about it. They didn't worry about what the English were going to say. They just did it because it was the right thing to do. So I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about Nevada. So, first of all, Nevada and this whole thing with the Bundy Ranch is not an isolated incident. It happened with the Hage family in Nevada also, happened with the Sacketts up in North Idaho, happens actually at the state level with Bill Demers here in Washington State and Eastern Washington. You know, this administration has declared war on rural America, and we need to call it that. It is war on rural America. Doesn't matter that the Bundys had a first in time, first in right, water right, and grazing right. They ignored that. Doesn't matter that when the court order said seize the cattle, federal government came in and shot them. Doesn't matter that they set up a First Amendment zone, which is kind of the most silly thing I've ever heard, actually. Perhaps we should do that for the Spokesman Review. Doesn't matter that the federal government came in, even though the court order said to seize the cattle. They destroyed personal property, actually destroyed some of the stock watering tanks. But here's the troubling part about that. Let's just ignore everything else. Here was the real troubling part about that. The federal government pointed sniper rifles at women and children. As a veteran, and some of these guys were veterans. Some of them were veterans. As a veteran, I took an oath. I took an oath to protect and defend American citizens, not point a gun at them. We have to talk to our friends and neighbors. If somebody gets an order like that and they are working for your bureaucracy, they should disobey that order. That is the American thing to do. And I want... And I want to tell you the story of what actually happened those 2 days. So there was a huge ramp up of the federal government. Huge ramp up of the federal government down there on the Bundy Ranch. And then Cliven Bundy one morning, he said, "Well, I think I need to talk to the sheriff today because the sheriff's been non-existent." And the sheriff actually showed up out there. And he talked to the sheriff, and the sheriff said, "I'm going to work on negotiating a deal." And Cliven Bundy said, "No, you're not. You're going to go back, and you, sheriff, are going to do your job, and you are going to disarm every federal agent in Clark County that is involved in this operation." That was what Cliven Bundy said. Sheriff left. Hour later, he appears on stage and he says, "Well, BLM is ceasing operations. I think we've got victory." And Cliven Bundy said, "That's not what we asked you to do, Sheriff. Cowboys, get your guns. Going to get our cattle back." And literally, 100 cowboys with flags rode down off that hill and went and stood versus the BLM. Now think about that. That is happening in America today, very close to April 19th, which was and is the anniversary, Patriots Day, of Lexington and Concord. Think about that. It's happening in America today. It's happening in America today. And that, because they had that courage, is why the BLM actually backed down. And that's why I stood and stand unashamedly with the Bundy family in Clark County, because I got to tell you something. The federal government sending armed troops in and sniper rifles to collect an unpaid bill is not American and should never stand in this country or in the state of Washington if they ever try it here. Amen. 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 Thank you. There's a lesson out of all this too that we need to keep in mind, that Nevada is what happens when we stand our ground on principle as Americans. We don't waver, and we truly unite together. We win. That is a formula, not just for Clark County, Nevada. It is a formula for all of America and Washington State. It is a formula for all of America and Washington State. So we need to stay united and ignore the naysayers. You know, you'll get some people that say, somebody actually said this recently, you know, you guys are ineffective. You guys can't get that stuff done. And I look at him, and Dave Taylor looks at him now and says, you know what, that's really weird, because we now have a network in Washington State that we built over the last 3 years of over 75,000 activists that we can hit one button and touch through social media. Our country isn't sliding further into a pit of hopelessness and despair because we are too far right. It's instead doing that because people can't trust politicians to stand for anything. That's why the Freedom Agenda, we went out there, we said, you know what, they got an agenda for everything. Why don't we have a Freedom Agenda for once? That's why the Freedom Agenda is the most successful slate of conservative bills in over 2 decades in Washington State. That's why. And I want to take a little bit of time and go through this because I think it's important. Out of 65 bills, 65 that we introduced as part of our Freedom Agenda, lower taxes, less government, and more freedom. 65 bills. We got 42 hearings. Usually we might get 1 or 2. We got 32 passed out of the House or the Senate. And we got 12 signed into law without veto by our liberal governor. Now, some people might say, Matt, you haven't sold me yet. Well, we also had 25 national news stories on those bills, and they became model legislation for other states around us that passed them as well. That is important, too, that we lead that way. So let me talk about what a couple of those bills are. One of them was a ban on Sharia law in specialty courts in Washington State. We could do it in Washington. We could do it anywhere in the country. One of them was opening up 1,000 miles, actually more than that, thousands of miles of roadway in Washington State for ATV use, which is going to help rural economies and get people back outdoors using our public lands. One of them, my favorite, was to help what I believe is going to be the next Amazon of the food industry. You can order online, and it comes farm to your table. And the owner of that company is actually here today, but I want to tell this. $32,000 plus is what he was paying in fees a year in Washington State with 39 separate regulatory jurisdictions. You want to take a guess at how much he was paying in Idaho? $65, and he had 1 regulatory jurisdiction. So we thought, you know, maybe we should kind of help lessen that. So we actually got a bill through that lessened it to 1 regulatory jurisdiction in Washington. We couldn't get it down to $65, but we got it down to 1,000, which was much less. And Mike Conrad, if you could stand, it was a good thing for America and a good thing for Washington State. Another bill that we got through was allowing and legalizing conversion kits for our disabled veterans in Washington State, which was actually illegal, if you can believe that. We had dozens of distributors coming into Washington State now opening up new businesses, just from a simple change that helps disabled veterans. Another Freedom Agenda bill. We also had a partial end to the Growth Management Act in some of our rural counties. And like I said, we stopped gun control. We stopped the gas tax increase 7 times. And by the way, on the gas tax increase, one of the local lobbying firms sent out a paper that said, you've got to vote for the gas tax increase. It's for the children. I saved it because I'm going to be using that throughout the campaign. You gotta be kidding me. But here's one you may not have heard of. Dave Taylor and Jason Overstreet helped negotiate at the end of session a delay of the implementation of part of Common Core. That is a huge victory for Washington State. So what does all of this mean? It means this: we don't need a majority, although I do want one, okay? We don't need a majority to win. We just need to stand for the truth, because the truth crosses party lines, especially the principles of freedom and liberty. And we need to be clear about what we believe in. We need to be clear on our vision that we want to restore a God-honoring constitutional republic. We need to be clear on our mission, that we need to show up and defend freedom locally. The forces of evil and Marxism depend on one thing, and that's us not showing up. That's what they depend on. And we need to go on the offense. We need to go on the offense. Again, the freedom agenda isn't just about legislators. It's about all of us. And it was because of all of you being involved on social media that we were able to make so many changes. But I want to talk tonight really briefly about one thing. If we go on the offense united, we win. But unity isn't a one-way street. And unfortunately in our Republican Party, we have some people that cry unity in one breath and whisper treachery in the next. So what's the solution? Well, the freedom agenda seems to be a point of unity. Our party platform seems to be a point of unity. Effective leadership seems to be a point of unity. And the Constitution seems to be a point of unity. So why don't we focus on those instead of recruiting against our own incumbent Republicans and threatening our ability to get a majority in Washington State? That should be the message that goes out to the Republican Party. I want to tell you, if you get a chance, because Tom Reed, every time he sees me, he's like, Matt, make sure to plug your radio show. So I got to do that. So like Freedom Agenda on Facebook. Make sure you like my page on Facebook, Matt Shea. Also follow us on SoundCloud and Podbean, where we have our radio shows. I'm on 106.5 Tom Reed, 106.5 Tom Reed. Every Tuesday morning at 8:30, it's 106.5 FM. And I have commentaries that play throughout the time. I want to end with this. We have got to be bold and courageous in our faith. We've got to be bold and courageous in our defense of the Constitution. We've got to be bold and courageous in our articulation of freedom. It's not just Matt Shea, it's all of us. People that love freedom and liberty, that are patriots in America. The world, like I said, is looking to us for leadership, not our president. Not our president, us. Let's embrace that. Let's not be afraid of it. Let's embrace that. My friend, the other day, I went to see him. He's dying of cancer. He's got a huge brain tumor. His face is horrible, and his head is twice the size it normally is. He's dying. And I walk into his room, and you know what he's got on the television set? He can barely talk. He's watching Braveheart. He can barely talk, and he still wants to fight. He still wants to fight. So my question to you tonight is, how many of you are going to change the world and help me fight to restore a God-honoring constitutional republic in America? Raise your hand. All right. So together we can change the world so that our kids and our grandkids can live in peace and prosperity and freedom. And may we bless God because we kept America free. God bless all of you. Thank you for being here tonight on my 40th birthday as well.